outstanding level of detail across an equally outstanding zoom range. Oh, okay.
My name's Elisa
Now,
Iannacone, and I'm a cinematographer with experience working in remote environments, conflict zones, and humanitarian crises.
are we
When working in the
live?
field as a journalist, I need a camera that's portable to keep me nimble, reliable because oftentimes you get that one-take wonder, and also something that's going to give me the highest quality footage when I'm working in post. Whether you're gathering news footage, working as a documentary filmmaker, or even in a situation like I find myself in right now, you want to make sure that the camera is basically an extension of your body and it's going to do exactly what you want, exactly when you need it. As you can see here, I'm dangling from a rope, where you really need a lightweight camera that you can trust. The reason I love the XA55 is because it has a 1-inch sensor, 5-axis image stabilization, and a 15 times optical zoom lens that can maintain 4K UHD all the way through, from the full-frame analogous of 25.5mm wide to over 382.5 telephoto. That's a pretty amazing range. I saw a high-speed boat when I was shooting and immediately put the camera's tracking abilities to the test. Check out how amazingly well it just locks in and follows it, despite the speed or me zooming. I also wanted to see how this camera was going to respond in a sunset environment where you have those highlights and shadows. I can control depth of field on the XA55 by dropping in my internal NDs, which are an absolute must for quick decision making, and get this type of bokeh effect. If you're going to be shooting in studio with this camera, that's absolutely fine too, because the camera has an SDI output, which means that you can connect an external monitor, or you can also work with a vision mixer. This camera has a 1-inch sensor, which is really amazing for a professional camcorder. It gives me that access to really high quality images, while also shooting in 4K UHD. What's really great too is that if you do decide to shoot HD, you can always get a shot in 4K and crop into that native 1080p factor, and then you have that extra zoom. All in all, really impressive for a camcorder. The Canon Cinema EOS C70 offers full cinema 4K in this incredibly compact and lightweight body. It has an optimized autofocus system that allows you to shoot 120 frames per second in 4K and up to 180 in 2K. Check out how the camera locks that autofocus in and follows the biker around the band. The C70 has a Super 35 dual gain output CMOS sensor and is compatible with RF and EF lenses. This camera has some amazing features in terms of dynamic range. If you shoot in the log 2 color space, you get 16 stops of latitude. Log 3 gives you 14. And if you know that you're going to be constricted in post or color correction, you can also shoot directly into PQ, which is often used for documentary, and HLG, which was created by the BBC and Japan's NHK. For these purposes, your job here is basically done. How much you want to play with it in post is entirely up to you. I'm currently shooting XF AVC 422 10-bit. But the cool thing about this camera is that you can also shoot HEVC, highly efficient video codec about half the size of XF AVC, again simplifying your life in post. Now when you combine the C70's 5-axis digital image stabilizer with a lens that also has IS, such as the Canon RF 24-105mm f4L IS USM, the one I'm using here, the camera uses both digital and optical stabilization to give you the best results for handheld. The way this works is that you'll see a 5% crop on your image to give the camera that extra leeway to compensate for shake. I got this shot as magic hour was ending on Canon's 1.2 50mm USM lens. As you can see, it gives you that incredibly beautiful, shallow depth of field, and I even got a little lighthouse in the background to give us that extra shine at the end. I did want to see how the camera responded in low light conditions, which is why I decided to shoot our descent into the portaledges for the night. Look at how it picks up the torches, the background sky, but then also the detail in the rock. That's where those 16 stops of latitude really come in handy. As sunset was over, I did want to put the XA55's infrared mode to the test. You can actually select between green and white light, which does get baked into the footage, so you have to decide that as you're recording. But there is not a single source of light here except for stars and moonlight. What this means is that you can basically keep shooting 24/7 no matter what, even if you are sleeping on the side of a cliff. Both cameras have dual slot recording capabilities, so you can relay or back up your material. In the end, which one you choose is entirely up to you, and you'll have to look at the purposes that you want it for. For the on-the-go solo shooter, Canon's got your back.
Hello and welcome to the first of a very special live Q&A, which is of course part of Canon's virtual trade show, Canon Vision. Now, as you all know, Canon Vision is happening in place of this year's IBC. And although doing an actual live event with actual people would have been brilliant, I've got to say it really is good to be back with another virtual event following the launches of the EOS R5 and the EOS R6 back on the 9th of July, which was of course Canon's biggest product launch to date. Now, for those of you wondering who I am, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's probably a lot of you. My name is Lucy Hedges. I'm the technology editor for the Metro newspaper in the UK. I'm also a presenter for the BBC Travel Show, an all-round gadget enthusiast. So I'm really excited and honoured to be playing host for you guys again today. So there's been a lot of exciting announcements today and a range of inspiring new products for cinematographers, independent filmmakers and the broadcasting industry. So let's just do a quick recap of exactly what has been launched. So headlining the announcements, it is of course the EOS C70. Now this also happens to be the first EOS camera to incorporate the RF mount and is the most compact and lightweight cinema EOS camera to date. Destined to become one of the best cinema cameras around, the C70 is fully loaded with features like high frame rate 4K shooting at 120 FPS with audio recording, improved dual pixel autofocus with intelligent tracking, and dual SD card slots. So Canon's, it's taking 35mm movie making in an exciting direction with a camera that's got the potential to transform the way films are made and transform the way that videographers work with a bit of kit that's been designed to meet the diverse and evolving recording requirements of the industry. The EOS C70 is also compatible with the newly announced mount adapter, the EF-EOS R0.71 giving users access to the extensive range of Canon EF mount lenses while paving the way to expand creative capabilities for even more shooting freedom. And finally, demonstrating Canon's commitment to lens innovation, there's the CJ20 EX5B high-performance broadcast lens that's been engineered to resolve an outstanding level of detail across an equally outstanding zoom range, and of course, build on Canon's extensive range of lenses. So what can you expect over the next couple of days? Well, Canon's invited a selection of guest speakers and a brilliant bunch of inspirational and all knowledgeable individuals from different corners of the planet to talk about their experiences in the industry and projects, and of course, using Canon kit to do it. So this is a fantastic opportunity for you guys to be inspired by fellow filmmakers, and we're going to be diving into a diverse variety of interesting topics over the next couple of days. It's definitely worth noting that the sessions will be available for replay later on the Canon Vision platform in case you missed one, or perhaps you just want to watch it over and over again. You should also keep an eye out on the Canon Pro social media channels to take a look at more content shot with the newly launched products, and of course, loads more content. Just head to @Canon EMEA Pro on Facebook and Twitter. You know the drill, you know what to do. Okay, so our first Q&A session is a good one. Joining me is cinematographer and video journalist Elisa Iannacone to discuss her use of the EOS C70 on shoots and what a camera means to her as a global video journalist and some of the challenges she faces. Also joining us on this session is Paul Atkinson, an all-knowledgeable product specialist from the Canon camp, who's going to handle the more technical side of things. Now, before we kick off, it goes without saying that we'd love to hear your questions. So if you've got anything you'd like to ask our special guests and DOPs throughout the session, we'd love to hear them. Don't be shy. Ask as many questions as you like. And on that note, I think we should start, right? Elisa, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. So let's start by, if you could just tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I am a video journalist and cinematographer, and I have experience working in 6 continents, producing work for outlets such as National Geographic, Newsweek, BBC World, and I have experience covering conflict zones and humanitarian crises. So for example, the Raba massacre in Cairo, the devastation of Cyclone Idai in Mozambique, and domestic violence within Iraqi refugee camps.
Mm-hmm. So you cover quite a diverse range of topics, yeah. And tell us about some of what your work has included to date.
Right. So more recently, I have devoted a lot of time to survivors of trauma, whether it be sexual violence or other types of trauma, and expressing that through the realm of visuals and imagination, creating multimedia exhibitions. And most recently, I just got back from Iceland shooting a music video for a Universal Records band and a short drama over the weekend.
Wow, you are a busy lady.
It's happening.
Yeah. So what's working been like during lockdown for you? Has it been, have you had work coming in? Has things slowed down? What's it been like?
Yeah, well, I made the wise decision to move to London in January, which means that I got stuck in the COVID Brexit sandwich. And that was tough because initially I had several shoots lined up internationally that all fell through. And then little by little, they started to reemerge. But things are certainly different. With the XA55 that I was using, I did get to shoot an interview with a Holocaust survivor where I was asked to please be in a separate room to the camera, which meant that we were in a recording studio and I was asked to be on the opposite side of the glass. And that's where the autofocus system came in very handy. We were working with a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor where the room was quite small and only the director was allowed to be in close proximity with a mask. So certainly things are changing, crews are diminishing, and there's never been a better time for the solo shooter.
Yeah, so it's really important then to have a bit of kit that has all the essential features you need to go out alone.
Absolutely. You need to be able to trust that it's going to capture what you need at all times.
And obviously with travel restrictions, how has that been for you? You obviously can travel around the UK within reason, but you must miss traveling a lot.
Yeah, I've missed travel a lot. I did get a chance, as I mentioned, to go to Iceland for this music video. And when we got our tickets initially, we were just going to arrive, shoot, get out. And then because of COVID, things evolved. And we had to quarantine for 5 days upon arrival and have 2 separate COVID tests. So certainly that delays production and changed the way that we were planning on shooting. Luckily, Iceland doesn't have too many cases, so it was still possible to do. But they're very strict with their norms. So, even though we were shooting outdoors, we all had masks and, well, except for the people in front of the camera, of course. So yeah, travel is an interesting one. It's going to be fun to see how it all evolves.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It's not impeded that much on your workflow. You're still a busy lady.
There's still movement happening.
Yeah. And
a nomad, always a nomad.
And as a video journalist, what would you say are the most important things for you?
I need to make sure that my equipment is portable, especially when you're in, challenging situations like a humanitarian crisis or a conflict zone, or even just a place where you need to stay nimble. You need to make sure that you have equipment that you're not going to have to be worrying about. You need long life batteries. Every dead battery is going to weigh on your body when you're moving, right? So you need to make sure that when you have a one take wonder, that autofocus is actually going to lock in and allow you to get what you need. And also, equipment that can take a bit of a beating, which is something that I've always liked about Canon, is the fact that, you don't have to be too precious about it. It will survive.
Like treat it with kid gloves, like, oh, put it down carefully. Not saying you throw it around and smash it, but you need something to be quite rugged on the front line,
Absolutely.
And obviously, you're dealing with, in some cases, people who've gone through extreme trauma. When you're there filming them with your kit, why is it so important to, humanize these stories when it comes to people who've been experiencing conflict?
Yeah, every day we are bombarded with harrowing images, on the news and everywhere that we go, even on posters and everything. And I just find that there's a lot of desensitization. There's compassion fatigue, which is a really real thing. We cannot empathize with every single thing that comes our way because it would be too heavy. So I always find that trying to tell a story in a different way, in a new way, in a way that might be unpredictable, it's always very important. And of course that my number one focus is humanizing the person or the story that I'm trying to tell, because no matter the circumstances, these are all people going through challenging things, and their well-being and their safety is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Story.
And I guess when you're in these kind of situations, it's important not to have intrusive kit as well. You want these people to feel comfortable. Totally. You don't want them to have this giant camera in their face. So you want to be able to get the best and kind of get those emotions out of them that you need to capture your story.
100%, and especially like working in areas like refugee camps or things like this, if you bring a large amount of kit, people get intimidated, and then it becomes much harder to break down
Absolutely.
the barriers to get at the story. So certainly having compact kit is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you just mentioned compassion fatigue. Why is it so important to you as a journalist to kind of combat that?
Well, I think the best example of that would be one of my most recent projects, which was specifically dealing with survivors of sexual violence. I just always found that whenever topics of this nature were addressed, we were very used to the photojournalistic black and white imagery that re-perpetuated, re-victimized the victim, basically. So whenever I saw someone that had gone through this, not only did I, see an image that made me feel bad, I also kind of felt a little bit of maybe pity or something like this, which I hated. And I wanted to be able to tell a story in an empowering way, in a way that survivors actually felt happy that they were expressing themselves and sharing their story. And so I like to work as a collaboration to make sure that the people that I'm documenting, the stories that I'm documenting, are actually going to allow people to share themselves in a way that makes them feel proud of having opened up about what it is that has happened to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to me about some of the challenges that you face as a video journalist.
Yeah, totally. I mean, certainly safety, I think, is the number one priority. And you need gear that is not going to be clunky or too large or weigh you down. And obviously now with lockdown, everything is changing so quickly. Like you mentioned, travel, the requirements for shooting, the sizes of crew. I mean, even for example, over this weekend, shooting in the more drama field, the size of crew is so limited. The amount of people that can be in a room, we were shooting with a newborn. So there have to be so many layers of protection.
Yeah.
So certainly all of these challenges are constantly evolving. And the most important thing is to have, like we mentioned, gear that you can rely on.
Yeah, and the C70 and the X55 have been your partners in crime.
Well, I mean, the EOS C70 was a great to test out. I was very, very lucky to get that chance. And I'm just really happy that I got to test it out also in those kinds of circumstances. I definitely got very lucky in Wales with a sunny day, because it could have been pouring rain, which wouldn't have been great off the side of a cliff. But certainly I think that the fact that it does have such latitude, such dynamic range, the fact that it does have such high recording capabilities, that it is able to see into those shadows. When I was shooting the short film that we've just screened, I was shooting quite late. It was past sunset, and the fact that we can still see the highlights, the detail on the rock, all of that, it's just really, really important and really wonderful to be able to work with kit like that.
And it just makes the whole process effortless as well. You haven't got this mental checklist of things because the camera's taking care of it for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another point is how great it is for post workflow as well as a solo shooter. The fact that you can shoot on log 2, right, to get your 16 stops of dynamic range. But if maybe you're not going to have that much time to correct, you can also go straight into PQ, HLG, and you have your broadcast delivery format already ready to go. And also the fact that you can record in a codec that's half the size of XFAVC. I mean, for weights, if you're trying to edit something quickly and turn it around, that's all really important.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the shoot you mentioned with the Holocaust survivor, and just how, because like you said, you had to leave the kit in the room, go in another room and rely on this camera to do the work. So what features in particular were really useful to you for this shoot?
So that one was with the XA55, and I think the key feature there is just autofocus, being able to have an autofocus that's going to prioritize the face and not suddenly, go to the background or go to a microphone in front of this person, and just be able to monitor from another room through a glass window, which is, completely counterintuitive to a cinematographer, just being like, I'm sorry, you want me to be in a separate room? What?
Yeah, to the thing that I need to do my job.
Exactly. So I'm operating what?
But I think that speaks volumes, really, doesn't it? To the capability of this camera.
And might I add that it was all sharp. so that was great news.
And how did you feel, when you came back to look at the footage? Did you feel a slight bit of dread, just thinking, please have got what I needed.
Mildly terrified. Yeah, because I'm going, they're trusting me with this. I'm trusting Canon, so so here we go.
Yeah. And let's just go back to the C70 finally. Just, I know you've mentioned some of the key features that were really useful for you, but if you just outline again, what features really impressed you and maybe how they worked with you on the front line when you were on a shoot?
Yeah, I think for sure having 16 plus stops dynamic range in log 2 was fantastic, and I decided to shoot my whole video when I was working with a C70 in that way. So the ability in post to color correct and really pull out both sides, the highlights and the shadows was excellent. Also the Super 35 dual gain output CMOS sensor is excellent for the quality of your images. The portability, also the flip out LCD screen. I mean, coming from a world years before of the same shape in the DSLR, right, where you weren't able to actually flip that screen so many times where you're wanting to do a shot and just look, it's so great to be able to have that feature with this super tiny cinema camera. The fact that it's a cinema camera and it's so compact, the long life batteries. I went on the side of a cliff. I didn't have a charger.
You were on the side of a cliff?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I just hooked onto the rocks. I was like, solar.
You are hardcore, lady.
I could have done solar, but no, I didn't need to. I just was able, I had 2 batteries. I didn't even change one.
Yeah. Oh, and how, that's not the kind of scenario you're going to be faced with, on the side of a cliff and you don't have battery. So it's really good that the battery was able to long last, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how does using the C70 compare to, I don't know, a shoot you were doing a year or so ago? Are you seeing obviously you're still using great kit, but the features and the kind of the versatility that this camera brings, can you see it bringing something new to the way you work?
I mean, I do really like the fact that it has the ability to have EF and RF lenses, because first of all, certainly RF lenses allow the communication between lens and camera to be a lot faster. So this means that any of the abilities such as image stabilization or autofocus can come instantaneously, and it's much more reliable. And that also means that I'm able to switch between photography and video seamlessly, which you end up doing all the time when you're on the field, right? So I think that's a really great feature.
Yeah. So there's so much to like about the C70. I think you've spoken about so many amazing features, and it really is a truly remarkable bit of kit. So Elisa, thank you for sharing those wonderful experiences. Obviously, you're going to still stay with us. So we're moving now on to the part of the session that's being led by you guys, and all your burning questions that you've got for either Elisa or our product expert, Paul. So I'm going to dive straight in with one of the first questions that I've got. This is for you, Paul. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
So how are you? I'm good.
Good. You've just been kind of silently sitting in the wings while I have a chat with Elisa, but ready to have you on camera now. Okay. So tell us about the main features of the EOS C70.
Well, the main one really is the first camera to take the new RF mount, the latest mount in the range, but also this same sensor as the C300 Mark III, which is what's given us the dual gain output. It's also light and compact, as we've already discovered and Elisa's discovered, but with the enhanced autofocus, which again is alluding to what Elisa's just said, with smaller crews and with the need now for socially distanced crews or single shooters. The features that are built into that camera really do enhance that capability. With having the Super 35mm, you get in the cinematic look, and it's the good bridge really between the dedicated video camera and the convenience of shooting on a DSLR with regard to size and mobility, but with the added advantage of having much longer recording times, professional audio, time code in and out, and the things that sort of make it the differentiation between the dedicated video camera and the video capable stills camera.
So talking about seriously compact camera with cinema quality, packed with features that basically supports a real versatile range of professional video requirements. This camera has a lot of appeal to a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and go on.
No, exactly it. I mean, if I sort of bring Win into shot here, this is one of the larger of the RF lenses. This is the 28-70 f2. But you can still see that it's small, it's compact, and it allows me to be very mobile. So for people like Elisa, using it for journalism or documentary shooting, but also music videos, documentary feature, that kind of thing, where you need that image quality, but you don't necessarily need a big camera with all the crew that you needed, even if it's available. It just fits perfectly in the hand for handhold shooting, for drones, for gimbals, for rigs and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point to hammer home. We've mentioned it a few times with Elisa, but you know, the fact that this camera equips you to be a one-man band, basically, you know, with lockdown, you know, budget constraints and things like that, people are going to need to maybe lessen crews or have to go out alone because of restrictions. So this really is quite one of the best time to launch this camera.
Yeah, I mean, we've always traditionally we will launch cameras around about this time, because normally we would just be recovering from IBC, obviously. Yeah. But even more so now with a camera that is so well equipped and well suited to single or small crew shooting, but without compromising the image quality. People have used a C300 Mark III, for instance, and have seen that the dynamic range that sensor is capable of, and especially when putting it into HDR workflow. And again, the ability to record direct in HDR, which means that you don't need to go into that post-production. So the whole range of features in there, even down to the 10 stops of neutral density that are built in, and works in exactly the same way as its bigger brothers and sisters in the Cinema EOS range. Yeah. So up to 10 stops of neutral density filter, glass filters, electronically operated. So again, it's just an all-round filmmaking tool. Yeah. At the sort of entry level, really, for the Cinema EOS range.
Yeah, and why is there no viewfinder on the C70?
Well, we launched the C500 Mark II and the C300 Mark III. We made the viewfinder an optional accessory on that. Now, the C70 does have the most interactive touchscreen system that we've had on a Cinema EOS camera before. So the ability just to be able to hold the camera here, look at your image, and still access your menu, etc. Plus, we do have an HDMI out, so if you did want to go down the route of having an optional viewfinder, then there'll be suitable third-party products. But realistically, the ease of use of using that screen, I think most people will find that it's just a good compromise.
But these things are so important. It's like the placement of a button, how far the screen can rotate. You know, sometimes it's these incremental changes, or just something that can seem quite small and insignificant. But when you're on the front line and using it, and you know, especially if you're on your own, you need quick access to all these features and just to be able for you to do your job seamlessly. So I think the C70 kind of ticks a lot of those boxes.
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of the controls that you're going to use on a regular basis, if you will, within finger and thumb reach near the grip. You can rotate the screen around, so it can just be here. So you can, again, it can be directly behind you. You can have it here. You can, again, in Elisa's favorite handling location there. So yeah, it just makes it very versatile and just ergonomically, because it is so small and compact, everything is within easy reach when you're holding the camera normally.
Yeah, and you know, at least as Elisa will attest, you know, videographers do find themselves in all kinds of crazy positions, on the floor, side. You know, you need a camera that's going to not hurt your arms and be able to keep up with you, basically.
Yeah.
Also, with other features on it, things like the autofocus, the tracking, and the enhanced face following and face tracking autofocus. Plus, it's also got auto ISO. So again, when we're not hand holding it, we can strip it down, take the top handle off, put it onto a drone. Because it's lightweight, it's less payload for the drone, which means more flying time. Yeah. So it just makes it much more versatile.
I would love to see this strapped onto a drone and see the footage that this can capture. I'm quite excited about that. So talking of, you know, drones, gimbals, this camera has a lot of versatility to apply to different shooting scenarios, but who would you say this camera is suitable for?
I would say that really, in the same way that the C100, the C100 Mark II was, the person who's been filming on a DSLR or mirrorless camera but wants to move to that dedicated video camera, So the entry-level guy and girl that's going into that area of shooting, while being able to use their existing camera as the B camera as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, social, wedding, documentary, news gathering, journalist, that entire sort of sphere that, of users will find this a useful tool.
Yeah, and would you say, you know, the development of this camera is almost a knee-jerk response to the way that the industry is changing? You know, like you say, so much social content, there's so many content creators out there. There are people entry level that want, you know, a high quality cinema style camera. Would you say that you're basically you're keeping up with how the times are changing?
Yeah, I mean, we've always tried to give our customers the products that they want and they need to enable them to express their creative vision.
Yeah.
It's even little things like now, a lot of stuff now is watched on smartphones and on tablets in the vertical format. We've never supported that before now, but even now you go to, when we're allowed to go there, to shopping malls, etc., you get digital signage. They're in the vertical format and the camera can support that. You can turn the camera into what would be sort of portrait format, if you like, on a stills camera. The GUI will correct itself, so the screen is now the right way around.
Yeah.
And we even put a tripod bush on the side of the camera, so you can still shoot it on a tripod for that format. So again, it's just meeting the needs of the customer or for their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lisa, I've got a question for you. You mostly work as a solo shooter. So can you tell us why cameras like the C70 is so important to you, and what could it mean if you don't get the right footage?
Well, I think in a lot of the circumstances that I find myself working in, it's a one take wonder, right? Things are happening and there's no, oh, can you please just do that again, right?
Yeah, you've got to get it.
I need to be able to have a camera that, as Paul was saying, is not just lightweight. So the lightweight part is important, not just not to get tired, but to be nimble, because you're constantly moving, shifting, things are happening. And you need to not worry that you have something clunky or something that will get damaged if you accidentally hit something with it, which, you know, guilty a few times. So, so that's important. And you just want to make sure that you capture what's actually happening. And that's where the autofocus response, the quick autofocus response is so pivotal. I mean, the film that I did at the beginning of this, from the portalage, certainly there was no imminent threat, you know, going on. But certainly you're having to balance in this portalage to make sure it's not flipping over. You've got people on ropes that are obviously, you know, balancing themselves. You need to make sure that you're able to actually lock in and not worry too much about, like, oh my God, is my focus right? Oh my God, as long as you see that autofocus locking in, you can actually trust that. And especially in sunset circumstance where maybe, you know, there's a bit, I'm not having like the ability to see every single thing on my screen because there's stuff happening. Having that trust is just really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's
and just to fill you with confidence, basically, that the footage you're going to get is the quality that you need to tell the story that you want to tell.
Yeah, you need an ally. You need technology to operate as an ally, and for it to allow you to actually focus on the story. So it becomes, like I said in the film, just a bit of an extension of your body. You know where those buttons are, you know how to operate this thing, and it's going to do what you need it to do when you need it to do it. So yeah.
That I find really interesting about this, you know, it's such a great compact camera, but I remember there was a time when, especially with cinematography type cameras, the bigger the better, you know, because it had all the kit, had everything you need. It's like, you know, I've got this massive bit of kit, which means my camera is better than yours. So it's really interesting how the industry's done a massive 180 and it's gone now to being compact, but incredibly, impressively compact, packing so many amazing features into such a small body.
Absolutely. I mean, there will be circumstances where you need to be very undercover. You know, you do not want to draw attention to yourself. You want something that maybe sometimes can fit underneath a burqa, for example. You know, so having something small that's going to allow that and give you the right quality, and also be able to see into shadows. Because, you know, you can't bring a massive lighting kit all the time when you're doing these things. You need something that's actually going to read into the shadows, and that's the advantage.
Yeah, definitely. So, Paul, compactness is key, clearly. It's a key feature of this camera. Why would someone use the C70 over the likes of, you know, the recently launched R5, for example?
Well, really, the R5 is an extremely capable camera for both stills and video. But as a dedicated video camera, the C70 just gives you that little bit more. So things like professional audio connections, for instance, with 2 mini XLRs. As I said earlier, we have a timecode in, timecode out connection as well, which means we can either have an external timecode generator for multi-camera shoots, or we can connect one camera to the other so they can share timecode, again, making life a lot easier when it comes down to post-production. And the recording formats on these as well. So with the C70, we are looking at XF AVC in 42 10-bit in 4K. There's no RAW capability on this camera. And realistically, again, at the sort of level that we're looking at, RAW may not necessarily be the good thing. You've still got Canon Log 2, you've still got Canon Log 3, you've still got the dynamic range, 16 plus stops at Log 2. So I said earlier that they will work together very well as an A and B camera. But the dedicated video camera, the Super 35mm, gives you that cinematic look. It gives you that cinematic depth of field. The built-in ND filters. It's a more rounded filmmaking tool for dedicated video work.
Yeah. And Elisa, what would you prefer? What do you prefer, the C70 or the XA55?
I mean, yeah, it depends. I think the answer for myself and for anyone who's considering these cameras is, what are you going to need it for? Because one of the great things about the XA55, for example, is that incredible 15-time optical zoom lens. The fact that you can go from 25mm to 380 telephoto in a moment, I mean, that could be the difference between me getting a shot from safety or not, or me getting a shot altogether or not. The fact that that's fast, right? I don't have to switch lenses, whatever. But obviously the cinema quality, the 4K, I mean, obviously the XA55 is 4K UHD. So, it depends. What is your priority? It would depend on the project, I think.
Yeah, basically what you're saying is you can't decide because they're both great bits of
basically
kit.
What I'm saying. Yeah, every project requires due consideration.
Very diplomatic.
And why is it so important for a quality cinema camera? Why is that so essential in your line of work? We've kind of reiterated this like over the last 40 minutes, but just to kind of hammer that home again as to why the quality of this camera is so important to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the demand from broadcasters, Netflix, and even just online for high quality content is continuously on the rise. We expect more with less crew. Now with COVID, with way less crew. And as a solo shooter, you want to make sure that you are keeping up to speed with all these different areas with sound. I mean, the fact that this camera, for example, Paul mentioned the NDs. The NDs are so useful. The fact that you don't have to add a matte box and like be pulling in and out all these filters and everything. I mean, in that moment, you need quick, efficient, reliable, easy, and that is a huge part. So I think at the moment, for the solo shooter, compact, reliable, high quality are all just indispensable features in a camera.
Yeah, and I guess the RF lens mount is incredibly useful for you as well as a video journalist.
Yeah, exactly. As I was mentioning before, just that ability to switch between photography and video, and also making all the features like autofocus and IS faster. It's just that communication between lens and camera, because certainly they have a 12-pin connector instead of the 8-pin connector from EF lenses. It's just that much faster. Yeah. So it's great.
And so, Paul, we mentioned this, we've touched on this, but the C70 combines the benefits of the Cinema EOS system range and the EOS R lineup. So can we just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the whole thing with the EOS R as a stills camera is because there's no prism, we can make the bodies a lot smaller. Because the distance between the end of because the rear mount could be larger, which means we can have faster aperture lenses. So when we combine that with the way that the zoom and focus works within the lens, plus the sort of extra controls, it just makes it a very natural blend when you put it onto a cinema camera for that RF mount.
Yeah.
And allows us to have a relatively smaller cinema camera.
And for someone like Elisa who's using the RF mount is incredibly, really useful to her. So why can you just explain to other video journalists like Elisa why this new feature is so important?
Because you'll be able to share the lenses between the two cameras. It means you're having to carry less equipment. It means that you've got the versatility of swapping. So if you do have the luxury of having a dedicated still shooter and a dedicated video shooter, you're able to share equipment between yourselves. But not forgetting, of course, the ability then to use the new adapter and continue to use the existing range of EF lenses as well. So
Yeah,
it's even more versatile.
I think the good thing about that as well is, a lot of people have collected an extensive range of lenses. So the fact that they can now bring those lenses to another camera system is going to have huge appeal.
Yeah, I mean, there was always the ability there with the EOS R range that you were able to use one of 3 different adapters. Of course, the advantage of the new adapter that we've also announced today is that it will correct the full frame coverage of that EF lens down to give you down to a super 35mm sensor, so you get the same field of view, with the added bonus of an effective increase in the effective maximum aperture as well. So an f4 lens becomes an f2.8 lens, for instance. With the other, you can use the existing adapters, but you don't get that benefit of the change in field of view and the effective increase in aperture.
Yeah, and what about image stabilization? You've got image stabilization lenses, image stabilization in the body. Talk to me a little bit about how this is going to enhance the usability.
So with the RF lens mount and the RF lens being used on the camera and lens are able to communicate and make it almost like collaborative image stabilization. So the image stabilization within the C70 is slightly different to the one that we find in the stills camera, insofar as it's using, as it does in some of our other cameras, it uses, if you like, unused pixels throughout the sensor. The sensor doesn't move. If you are using an EF lens with one of the adapters, then the lens will take care of 2 axes of stabilization, and the camera will take care of the rest. But it'll just do its own thing, if you like. So with the RF mount on the RF camera, you get the communication. You can also do a 2K sort of crop for even greater stabilization as well.
Yeah, wow. So we are really talking next level image stabilization here. Yeah. And tell us about the recording format. How does it meet the professional needs?
Well, being 422 10-bit, XF-AVC is a well-established recording format. It should go seamlessly into existing workflows. We'll have the MXF wrapper as well, and again, that should go straight into existing workflows. If a plugin is required, it will be available as a no cost to the customer download, along with some other software as well, such as XF Utility as a file management tool. But alternatively, we have MP4 recording, and we have 2 flavors of MP4 in there. We have HEVC H.265 in 422 10-bit and 420 8-bit H.264.
Yeah.
Because we have two SD card slots, we can not only do the sort of traditional dual card recording, so either simultaneous or relay, depending on how you set your prime recording format, you can have, for instance, you could have a long GOP and an all-I on separate cards at UHD. You can have UHD on card A and full HD on card B. 4K and 2K, you can record an all-I 422 10-bit and a 420 8-bit proxy. So the versatility for the filming format has never been really greater than it is on this camera.
Yeah, so we're talking a serious level of combinations here when it comes to recording. Yeah, and talk to me about the ND filter and auto ISO. Okay,
so we've got 10 stops of ND filter. To go to the 8 and 10 stops, we go to the extended option in the menu. When you have the super 35mm sensor, you've got nice wide aperture lenses. If you are filming in a very bright situation, and you want to control that depth of field even more, then you can start putting the ND filter in. And as Elisa said, when you've got a small compact camera, do you really want to then start putting matte boxes, filters, etc. on the front of it? It sort of takes it away. They've got their place, absolutely. If you're using one of the other cameras in the Cinema EOS range where you're in a full filming setup with a crew, absolutely. They still got that, obviously, but that option is there. For the auto ISO, again, this is a first on the Cinema EOS camera. We've never had this before. And it allows you to set a maximum as well, so you're not going to suddenly be surprised when the ISO starts getting really high. You can set a maximum point for that. But again, if you're on a drone, on a gimbal, if you're mobile, doing a follow shot, something like that, where you've gone from very bright to a less bright shooting environment, you haven't got ambient lighting, beg your pardon, you haven't got supplementary lighting, relying on ambient lighting only, then it will just very, very nicely adjust that ISO to keep the same exposure for you.
Yeah, rather than that, you know, when it changes really quickly and abruptly, which nobody wants. Elisa, how did you find those features? Are they particularly useful for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I was thinking about when Paul was speaking is this all adds to your speed. So when you're working with a camera of this nature, you're generally, as a solo shooter, you need things to happen quickly. And, you know, sometimes you're indoor, outdoor environments, you need to be able to pop in those NDs and drop them out as quickly and efficiently as you can. And then also one more thing that I forgot to mention was the slow-mo capacity, to still have, you know, full 4K cinema slow-mo at 120 frames per second, which ironically, until I shot this, I was not sure where I would use it for. But then when I had this like biker coming around, I was like, oh my God. And that decision to get that shot, it was really like a split-second decision where I see this person coming on like slow-mo, you know, and it just, and then the autofocus locked even in slow-mo. And I was like, yes. So yeah, I mean, I think all the features in this camera allow for you to just be, again, nimble, quick, efficient, and just make use of all of the features to make sure that you're getting the highest quality material.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is exactly what you want from a shoot.
Yeah.
Stress-free.
So I'm never 100% stress-free, but hey.
To add as well, when you are shooting the slow motion, you'll also get audio.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say, so another benefit of these dedicated video cameras, it's audio quality. Did audio quality meet your demands?
Right, yeah. So, I mean, in my particular case, I was shooting on that ledge. And I mean, I do go back and forth from recorded audio and camera audio. But the camera audio was actually fine. And I was quite surprised that, you know, we've got waves underneath. And my assumption was that it was going to be completely unusable. Before going in there, I just thought, no ways this is going to work out. And then when I actually played it back, I was like, you know what, that actually is usable. It's not bad at all. So certainly the camera, you know, it responded very well in the circumstances that I put it in. It wasn't a very windy day, so I would like to put it under the test. But Paul, maybe you could speak about winds, what would happen then? But it worked out very well for me.
Yeah, so audio clearly is incredibly crucial to your work.
Yeah, I mean, even though I'm a cinematographer, we all know that an audience will forgive poor cinematography before they forgive poor audio. So painful to hear, but true.
Yeah,
you need to make sure that you get that.
Absolutely. And we touched on this earlier, you know, the power of the battery capacity. Paul, let's talk about the battery life. What are we looking at here?
Battery life around 175 minutes. On the supplied BPA 30. So yeah, I mean, as Elisa discovered, over 2 hours of recording per battery, and because although the image is being recorded at a fairly high data rate, we're still able to use SD cards, again, much more affordable. But this is just all down to the ability to use the camera for a long time. Without having to carry a load of battery. I mean, when I first started shooting, I was shooting up in the Arctic Circle with an old battery belt, and I was lucky to get 15 minutes.
Wow.
You know, but it's just things have changed so much, and now we get over 2 hours from the standard battery, and it will take the higher capacity BPA 60 as well.
Yeah,
which increases that quite a bit.
Yeah, I can attest to those days. It's not even that long ago, but you know, I'm on shoots and we're changing batteries constantly. And then sometimes you get to the end of the day and it's like, we don't have any left, and there's nowhere to kind of just quickly plug it in. So you never could, you know, ever underestimate the power of a good battery.
No,
Yes.
exactly.
So I think this is going to be, people are going to be armed with this kit with the confidence that they can get what they need, and maybe, you know, get some extra shots as well. Maybe it might end up on the editing room floor, but you know, the opportunity to be able to shoot everything that you want and a bit more is going to be a godsend to a lot of people, I think.
I guess if you haven't got the shot, you can't A, use it, or B, decide not to. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I think that's going to bring us to the end of our Q&A. We're talking about a camera here with so much choice. I think, Elisa, you've given such brilliant examples of how this camera can be used in so many versatile ways. And Paul, thank you for sharing all the technical specifications. There really is so much to dive into with this camera. I feel like we probably could go on a bit more, but the time is ticking, so it means I've got to wrap this up. So that brings us to the end of our first Canon Vision live Q&A. Thank you guys for submitting such brilliant questions. With so much to talk about, unfortunately, we didn't have time to answer them all, so we do apologise if your question did not get answered today. I'd of course like to thank Elisa and Paul for taking the time to join me for this special live event and for sharing your expertise and experience in the industry of Canon's new products. It's been really brilliant hearing from you both. I've really enjoyed this first session. As for you guys watching, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and more importantly, that you feel that you've got some real valuable insight about Canon's new products. Now, before I go, I should probably mention that there's a special episode of the Shutter Stories podcast. This is Canon's podcast, and you need to look out for that. It's a brilliant listen, and I'm not just saying it because I'm the host. It really is fun, really insightful, talking to a load of guys using the kit and how they felt. And it really is a great listen. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.